This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com. The only place.
Anomaly. We think that next year SummerSlam will go back to August. I think they just wanted to, test the waters of a football stadium, because here in the U.S., Dave, of course, August is preseason football. So I'm sure if SummerSlam is not going to be in stadiums, I'm sure NFL teams are going to be a little leery of wanting the WWE to come in and chew up their field with equipment and rings and stuff before the season starts. So maybe that's why. But I'm not saying that's definite. That's totally just a theory. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's a reasonable theory at that too. It does. You've got the preseason. They're into full training mode. They're getting their preseason games. They're not going to want any damage to a ground. I've actually seen what can happen on grounds when they put big events in too close to sporting events, and grounds can be really significantly impacted to the point that you can't even play the games for weeks on end. So it would make sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, if the league, if the NFL or if teams pick a week that they're not home and it's a turf stadium, kind of like Vegas was last year, they can get away with it. But, Nashville is an outdoor stadium where the Titans play. It is grass. So, but they have some time probably to fix it up before the Titans. I don't know whenever the Titans' first preseason game was, if it already happened or not. But in any event, I believe that SummerSlam will go back to being in August next year. Having said that, we, of course, we're talking a lot about SummerSlam right now because this month's episode, we did, of course, do a Royal Rumble episode in January. We did a WrestleMania episode back in March. So, of course, this month we need to do a SummerSlam episode. Dave, give us a little background on what we're diving into this evening.
Oh, I think you've summed it up really well. We're gonna like we did with the Rumble and WrestleMania, where we just looked at a few different ideas from different events. We're gonna have a jump through some different ideas for some different SummerSlams. Maybe a couple of main events, a couple of overall card looks, but we're just looking at some events over the years that perhaps maybe didn't live up to standard, or maybe there was just something that didn't make sense about the booking decisions, and we're gonna consider what might have been different. How could it have been done differently? As we like to do here on Through the Looking Glass, we look through that glass and we just see, could events have been different and what impact might that have had? So I think we're in for a little fun ride tonight, looking at some nostalgia, remembering a bit of SummerSlam history. As you said, SummerSlam has already taken place this year. Obviously this would have been done before Vince retired, but in their infinite wisdom, they thought that they heard that we were going to be doing this event, this podcast episode, and they thought, nah, we're gonna mess around with them. We're gonna run early just to cause some trouble. You know what the WWE is like. They don't like anyone treading on their soil. But no, I think we're gonna have a good time in this episode. It's going to be fun. Just looking at a few different SummerSlam scenarios. So I think it's going to be a good time. But I remember SummerSlam is one of those ones. I was well into my wrestling fandom when SummerSlam first came out. It's actually one of the. I actually remember really clearly the build to that first SummerSlam back in '88. So it's been a part of my life. My wrestling fandom has always, that SummerSlam in August is always a big thing, and I'm sure you've grown through it too. You've got that similar time frame as me, Scott, that you've grown up with it, lived with it. It's a part of the wrestling DNA in essence. But I was just wondering, Scott, like when we think SummerSlam, I don't want to spend too long on this, but when you think SummerSlam, what are some of the things that really stand out to your memory? What are some of your favorite memories over the years of SummerSlam?
Well, Dave, my crew of friends when I was a kid, we were all obviously diehard old school Federation wrestling fans, like of course yourself, and we all were in charge of a pay-per-view. Each of us kicked in. Each of us were in charge of hosting a show. So we all got, we all hosted, and we all got pizza and stuff. So I was the SummerSlam guy. So in the early years on Monday night, I would have my guys over, and we would watch SummerSlam, and then I go to my other buddy. The only one we didn't do was Survivor Series because, of course, that was Thanksgiving. We were all with our families. But I had one buddy that hosted the Rumble, and we had another guy that hosted WrestleMania. I hosted SummerSlam. So SummerSlam was always a soft spot for me. And I remember the build to SummerSlam '88 very, very well. The Mega Bucks, Mega Powers, and Jesse, and the ref, and Honky rightfully looking up at the lights to the Ultimate Warrior, and then Honky spending the next 2 years jobbing to everybody from the janitor to the catering crew, paying back for the.
Now I don't remember Dusty ever being a janitor. He was a plumber. He was a guy. Don't know that he was ever the janitor.
That's true. Yeah. But the one that I will always remember as probably, and it still is to this day, probably my favorite SummerSlam of all time is SummerSlam '89. I've mentioned that on this. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that on this show, and I've definitely mentioned it on other shows that I've done. I love that show. That's a card that I could watch, and that will not be one we go through the looking glass on because that show is impeccable. So we will not be tampering.
That's right.
With SummerSlam '89 tonight because that show was perfect. That show was just awesome. Because I was all in on the Warrior Rude feud in '89. Of course, Hogan Zeus, love that, and all the other that 6-man tag. What was it? The Rougeaus and Martel against the Rockers and Tito. I mean, that match is awesome. And then you get the back show, which everyone says is like the crap end. They put all the workers on the front end, and they put all the Hosses on the back end. That doesn't necessarily mean the matches were worse. They were just different.
Oh, they were different.
You had the Hoss guys on the back end,
Demolition. I mean, I'm a big Demolition mark. Everyone knows that, but
yes,
and I'm not a big fan. I'm like you. Cannot stand Duggan, but that 6-man with Demolition and Duggan versus the Towers and Andre, it just astonishes me that no one plays up the fact that Smash slams Akeem and the Boss Man in this one, and it's an awesome moment that really never got played up so much because prior to that, the only people who really slammed either of those guys were Hogan.
Right.
So it just always astonished me how strong Smash actually was.
I agree. Crazy, right? Yeah, I agree with you. So and then the main event's great with the loaded purse, and I just love that show.
I've got to agree with you on that one. I mean, SummerSlam '89 is probably my favorite one all time. I mean, one of my favorite ever matches. I don't rank it as the greatest match I've ever seen, but one of my favorite matches is the Hart Foundation Brainbusters match that kicks that car off. It is,
oh my God.
It is sensational. And
absolutely.
I can watch that over and over. I've seen it so many times. It is, two of my favorite tag teams. If I had a top 5 favorite tag teams, Hearts and the Brainbusters would be in that top 5 and never move. Yep. So it's always had a good spot. I've always enjoyed that match. So that to me is just, when I think SummerSlam memories or SummerSlam matches, I think of that one. And then obviously the Warrior Rude match is sensational as well later in the card.
Yes, absolutely. And Piper coming out, the commentary of Tony and Jesse is just absolutely tremendous. You could shoot somebody and not get disqualified? You're dumber than Monsoon. Oh, God. So great. SummerSlam 90, I always loved. Not as much as I love 89, but 90 is still a good show. some other ones from the 90s we will discuss this evening, so I won't get into those. But another one that's probably number 2 on my list is it's a tie between two SummerSlams that I probably should have gone to and didn't go to either because they were so close to me, and I still kick myself to this day. And that is SummerSlam 98 and SummerSlam 2002. SummerSlam 98 to me was the show that won the Monday Night War, because you had about 2 months before was the big Nitro in and we talked about it on our Goldberg episode. The big Nitro in Atlanta. Goldberg beats Hogan, wins the world title, and WCW had that last little kick in the gut for the next few weeks. But then I think SummerSlam 98 sealed the deal. I love that show. Triple H Rock in the ladder match, of course. Taker and Steve.
Well, I feel that Hunter Rock ladder match is so underrated. When people talk about,
I agree.
People talk about greatest ladder matches of all time. I mean, it's obviously it's not on par with your TLC matches and your Edges and your Christians and your Hardys. I mean, it's not on that par because it's a different type of match, but it is a really well worked, very tight, and tells a great story. I just think it's criminally underrated because it's never talked about as one of those top ladder matches. I'm not sure it's even on I don't know if it's on any of those DVDs, either of the ladder match DVDs. I can't remember.
That's a good question, Mr. Hall. I do not know either. It should be. It's on the SummerSlam. It's on a couple of comps. I think it's on the MSG comp. Yeah. But, and then 02, which was down at Nassau Coliseum, which was I should have my wrestling card, revoked for not, I had the money. It was 45 minutes away. No excuse that I didn't go to Nassau to see. I mean, why do I not spend the money to see Shawn come back and face Triple H in a street fight? Like, am I on drugs? Like, what the hell was my problem? I mean, that was just stupid. But anyway, that card is just awesome. Another card we will not be touching tonight because there's no need to. Again, that was a card that I coming out of the Attitude Era and the early onset of the brand extension, I think there are a lot of fans who are really. It was one of the first times I started to struggle. Look, do I really, what had been happening on Raw? You sit there and go, gee, it's just not quite what it was in the Attitude Era. Things felt a little bit of a downturn, but I think the match quality on that show was one of those ones that really sort of, it opened my eyes. It sort of reminded me, this is what a wrestling event should be. We've gotten so accustomed to these awesome storyline builds, and whether or not the match hit the great in-ring heights never really mattered because the crowd and the build, you were getting that storyline drive. But I really feel SummerSlam 02 really brought back the in-ring emphasis at the end of the story. Right, exactly. And just amazing top to bottom matches. We had Flair Jericho, and you had RVD Benoit, and you had
Kurt Ray,
and you had Test and Taker, which is even pretty good. Just an amazing card, top to bottom. So yeah, those are my SummerSlam memories, particularly those ones from the late 80s and early 90s, because I was in charge of SummerSlam in my circle of wrestling friends, and then I had 2 other friends, and they were in charge of the Royal Rumble and Mania. So I've always had a soft. It's probably my favorite song. It's probably my favorite pay-per-view brand of WWE is probably SummerSlam, strictly for that reason, because I was, it was the first pay-per-view I ever bought with my own money that I hosted. So I always had a soft spot for that. So. What about you, Dave? What other? I know you're like me, the Federation ones. What ones kind of stick out for you?
Oh, I think like we've said, I think the 3 you've mentioned really stick out as overall cards. 89 is like I harped on that before. It's probably my favorite one all time. 02, I can always sit down and just enjoy. I think the big thing, I think in more recent years, one of the things that sort of stuck out to me is for a few years there, SummerSlam seemed to be the night that Brock decided to turn up and put on a good match against a guy that you wouldn't maybe expect him to. Brock Punk, Daniel Bryan, AJ Styles, John Cena, Punk, John Cena, Daniel Bryan. Like, you just had these little gluttony of years where you had whether it was Punk, AJ Styles, or Daniel Bryan put in a memorable main event with either Brock Lesnar or John Cena, and those main events just absolutely scorched and were real memorable matches. And I think you just had that little period of about 5 or 6 years where every year it just seemed to be the main event of SummerSlam was always going to deliver. And Brock always seems to turn up at SummerSlam. Maybe he just likes it a little bit warmer. Always seems to turn up and put on something good there.
Yeah, he does. And he's done it many times on that stage. I watched back-to-back years in, I guess it would be 2015 and 2016. Was it back? Yeah, 2015 and 2016, or was it 16 and 17? Now that I can't think about it. I think it was 15 and 16. He wrestled Taker and Orton in back-to-back years. Yeah, I think Brock that's a big brand for Brock. He's had some historically good matches. Brock is not a main topic tonight, I don't think. No.
No.
But we do have some other ones. So what we're going to do this evening is we're not going to go through every one because, again, some of them are immaculate. But we picked out 6 years. 6 years where we could go through the rabbit hole, and do a little tweaking and fix what ended up being, in some cases, not a terrible card, but maybe with a little alternative waggling, we could come up with an even better card, or a show that's absolutely dreadful that totally needs fixing, which we have a couple of cases of that. So we will try and be as expeditious but informative. We will try not to go too long, but we will definitely be informative, and we definitely would love your opinion. So please hit us up on Twitter at PTBN Wrestling after you listen to the episode and tell us what you think of our opinions on which years of SummerSlam need fixing, and some ideas of other years maybe that we didn't hit on that you think could also use some tweaking. Maybe this year's card in Nashville, or last year's card that I got to see live in Vegas. Maybe that needed tweaking. Who knows? But we'll see. So at PTBN Wrestling, you can go to our Place to Be Facebook group page, comment on there as well. Dave's usually hovering around there, ready to answer your questions and give us your give you our thoughts on your thoughts. So Dave, let's. I gotta find the Doctor Who theme as we're going through the vortex. Give us our first case study this evening.
All right. Well, we're going to kick off this little journey by jumping all the way back to SummerSlam 91, and really, I think the standout in SummerSlam 91 is the match made in hell. Now, if you are like me and you've listened to every episode of the Place to Be podcast with Scott and his PIC, Justin Rosero, you will know and you will have heard them talk about the main event of that card before. And the idea that by the time SummerSlam 91 hit, Hogan and Slaughter was done and dusted. They really were dragging out a storyline that had been completed. And throwing on top of that, the General Adnan and the Iron Sheik, who could barely move that night. Yeah. It really did not make for a good main event. It was always predictable. It was no one expected the trio of terror to stand any chance against Hogan and Warrior, the top two guys in the company. So we go back and we look at, well, what could have been different there? And I think the storylines were all in place. I think everything was in place, and all it would have taken was a little bit of a hold off on the announcement of the main event for that card, because I think you guys have touched on this before, but I'd like us to explore the idea of, should the match made in hell have been Hogan Warrior against Jake the Snake Roberts and The Undertaker?
Mm-hmm.
Because when we look at the build around that, the Undertaker and Warrior had already entered the early stages of a feud. And of course, it's the classic heel turn of Jake the Snake. Warrior, he comes alongside Warrior to help him overcome the darkness, to help him conquer the darkness, and he puts him in all the various scenarios over the weeks of superstars of wrestling, and culminating in the famous one where he's in the room, locks him in the room with the snakes, and allegedly, or in theory, Warrior is bitten by the cobra, the worst looking cobra in the history.
Totally.
But getting outside of that, we're talking about the build. Warrior's build in the lead up to SummerSlam had been completely focused around The Undertaker and Jake the Snake Roberts. And Jake and Undertaker did not even get booked on that card. And where things go afterwards, or where things are clearly planned to go afterwards, was that Taker and Jake are going to be linked into storylines with Hogan and Warrior. I mean, Hogan ends up meeting Undertaker at Survivor Series, and the plan was for Warrior and Jake to feud post SummerSlam, until the Warrior made his fatal error in holding Vince up for money. And we all know how that played out behind the scenes. So
yes, we do.
So really, we need to ask ourselves, should the main event of SummerSlam 91 have been Hogan and Warrior versus Taker and Jake, with Sid as the referee? And I guess I want to start there, Scott. Your thoughts. Should that have been the main event, and why?
I think that would have been a perfectly great main event. Hogan and Warrior were still pretty locked in. I don't know. Obviously, we can't pretend to ignore the fact about Warrior and the money demands and the firing. I mean, we could, in this universe, in our alternate universe, pretend that didn't happen. We did a whole episode on Montreal never happening, so we could do that as well. So let's just say Warrior was happy and everything was fine. That would have been a great match, and I think would have been the peak, similar to 3 years earlier when, Hogan was champion. You could be building to, if you did plan on doing Taker and Hogan still at Survivor Series, that's entirely possible. Obviously, Flair was not there yet. So I don't have a problem with Hogan Warrior against Taker and Jake. I think that's perfectly fine. With Sid as the ref, I think that's. I totally think that's fine. The rest of the card, honestly, you really don't do anything with. I mean, you had amazing title matches. You had titles changing all over the place. You had the Legion of Doom pretty much extended squashing the Nasty Boys. You had, of course, the amazing Bret Perfect match. You had Virgil beating DiBiase with Piper cheering him on. The energy level at that show at the Garden was just amazing. And I can't see that being duplicated or mimicked with any other kind of match switch on the undercard. I think all you do is just ditch Slaughter and Muhammad or Mustafa and 97-year-old Iron Sheik and Adnan, and you just stick Taker. Why do you not have Taker and Jake on that show at all? I mean, that just makes no sense.
It makes no sense at all. And I think this is a match that even in light of even taking into account Warrior leaving, I think it can still, because you build in, no one knew that was going to happen. So the storyline plays out as it does. The question you've got to ask yourself is, how do you carry this match and still create the opportunity for Hogan and Undertaker to meet at Survivor Series for the title? Because if that's where you're going, you can't have Hogan cleanly pin the Undertaker, because that just wipes that storyline out of the picture.
Right.
You need to create a scenario. You need to look at this. How can that setup allow things to move forward? And I was thinking about this in the lead up, and this is my theory, and I'll put it out there, and then Scott, you might have a different idea, but this would be my theory, that the match, obviously Hogan and Warrior getting cheered, Jake and Taker cheating left and right. I picture that and Sid is the ref, and so Sid is constantly getting in the face of Jake and Taker, as he would probably in the face of Warrior and Hogan. You can't do that. Running that, he's the justice line and playing it down the middle like he did in the actual match made in hell.
Right.
And I picture at some point in the match, Taker drops Hogan with the tombstone. He puts him down with the tombstone, but when it happens, something is going on with Jake and Warrior that Sid is completely distracted, out of the way. He's trying to separate them, or he's trying to get Warrior out of the ring, or who knows. For whatever reason, we don't have a pinfall attempt. So we don't get Hogan doing the Hulk up. We don't get the kick out of a pin and a Hulk up. Taker basically gets up and for whatever reason goes over, and it might be separates Jake or pushes Warrior over the top rope, or they do something that causes Taker to get up. And at this point, Warrior and The Undertaker can start brawling, and maybe even with Jake, they could start brawling down the aisle. And Justice starts the straight count. He's counting him out, and while he's counting him out, Hogan can sort of do the sit-up, and he can go to a knee and even get back up on his feet, and he's looking around, huffing and puffing. Where is everyone? The only one left in the ring is Sid. Sid counts the other guys out of the ring as they go through the back, which allows Warrior to be fired when he walks through the curtain.
Right.
Sid raises Hulk's hand. Hulk is victorious. Hulk gets to pose because, as Bruce Pritchard likes to tell us, Hogan must pose at the end of pay-per-views. It creates that scenario, and they can even do the Hulk-Sid, inviting Sid back and posing with him as well. But it prevents Taker from being beaten clean. He's basically battled Warrior out the back. It gives the count out. So we've seen Taker with a clean tombstone, and Hogan was down. And could he have been pinned? We don't know. But it allows the build then coming out of it would be Paul Bearer can go on, we had you beat. He tombstoned you. You were beaten. We were going to win the match, but, Warrior is a pain, and we had to chase him out, and then he's a coward, and he ran away, and we never see him again. Mm-hmm. Alternatively, Taker and Warrior are brawling to the back, and Hogan maybe takes down Jake. Leg drop down, Hulk's up, takes down Jake. He gets the pin on Jake clean, because Jake can then move on to Savage. The evilness is there, but I don't like the idea of either of them losing, because Jake has only just turned, and he needs to be kept strong, in my opinion, for wherever they're going to go, which is eventually Savage with Warrior leaving. Right. So that's how I picture this main event going. It allows Hogan to get his win and pose. It keeps our two heels strong. Warrior's irrelevant because he's being fired anyway, and it allows everything to move forward the way it ended up doing.
Yeah, and everybody got their spot in, and Warrior's gonna it's Warrior's going to be Warrior. I mean, he's going to have to get squeezed out anyway. So that going out of that, you still get Hogan Taker, the build. We haven't heard anything about Flair yet, of course, because in this universe that still happens. And you get peeling off of Jake from that feud and then going into the feud with Savage, which you cannot touch because that feud is amazing.
And you still have the ability to do what they did, the whole wedding at the reception, the present with the snake. I mean, that can all still happen. That so can all still happen because Jake's sitting there going, I chased Warrior out and there's my next target.
Yep. So good, that feud.
Yes, it was.
91-92 heel Jake is just gold. Absolute gold. So there's our first case study, SummerSlam 91. Really, the only thing we need to touch, we need to tweak around is the main event, because the rest of that card is amazing. So there's no need to touch that anymore. We just need to fix the main event and make it more relevant for the summertime and not deal with a storyline that started back in February and was not going to go all the way to August. So, all right, Dave, case study number 2.
All right. Well, we're just gonna travel 12 months later, and not because we're gonna jump to SummerSlam 92, not because SummerSlam 92 is a bad card, but I want us to look at the concept of what if this card was not held in the United Kingdom. Because you guys have discussed this again. This has been discussed quite regularly. That originally the card was announced. The original SummerSlam was announced for somewhere in the US, and you probably know offhand. You probably know where it was.
I do. It was supposed to be, according to I think it was Herb and a few other people. The strong rumor was that SummerSlam 92 was supposed to be in Washington D.C.
Right.
So
it wasn't, the original plans weren't for SummerSlam to be in the UK. Then they moved it, and then we have what's become the famous story of Brett pitching to Vince, look, let me wrestle Davey Boy in the UK. We'll put the title on him. It'll be a great match. And so we have almost, I feel almost the card gets built out of that. It gets built out of this idea of they're going to the UK, Brett's wrestling Davey Boy, and then everything else gets built around that. That's what I always felt seems to be the outpouring of this build up. So I want us to look at the question, what if UK pay-per-view never happened? What if the match was held in DC? What if the card was held in DC? How might it have looked different? How might it have been booked differently? And I think this would be interesting because I think there are a few things. I question whether some of the booking decisions that went ahead would have occurred. And I think clearly the first one is, if we start with the IC title, Brett's not wrestling Davey Boy if it's not in the UK. And I think the original plan was he was going to drop the title to Shawn, because Shawn ends up with the belt anyway. So I have a feeling that was the original plan. Brett and Shawn were going to wrestle for the IC title. They were certainly wrestling on the house show circuit, and it's around this time that they did that original ladder match, and it certainly seems to be the plan. Brett and Shawn were going to meet for the title, and Shawn was going to take it from him. Your thoughts? Would you agree? Would you agree that's probably where they were headed?
Yeah, I think so. I think the plan all along was for Brett to transition to the main event and become World Wrestling Federation champion. I think that was always in the plans. So, because honestly, and JR and I documented this, Bulldog didn't really do much of anything in 1992. And then suddenly we moved the show to Wembley, and all of a sudden he gets an Intercontinental title shot. Like, it made no sense. Like, he was pretty much doing nothing. You know, he was just kind of holding up the mid card throughout most of 1992. And then all of a sudden the show's at Wembley, and all of a sudden he has an IC title shot. That just made no sense at all. So if it was supposed to be at the old Cap Center in Landover, which was the original plan from what I have read for SummerSlam 1992, I do believe that it was supposed to be Brett and Sean, and I think Sean was supposed to win the title by nefarious means, and I still think we get Warrior and Savage for the world title. However, here's the interesting thing. Let's and my apologies for consistently hearing me drink, but I need to keep my pipes moist, or else Dave will be talking to himself. And that's like listening to Herb Coons read his own notes. So we don't want that either. So my apologies. I can't think at the moment, Dave, of where else to kind of finagle that world title match, because you don't want to have a SummerSlam where the heels win both matches. So if we assume that Warrior and Savage still have their schmaz, and Flair beats Savage that Labor Day weekend in Hershey, and then in mid-October in Saskatoon, Brett wins his first world title. Do we assume that all of that still happens? Because you can't. I don't think you could have a double main event and have the heels. Because I'm thinking to myself, if Flair's healthy and you do Flair Savage at SummerSlam in a rematch and Flair wins it back, I can't see you having both Flair and Shawn win the belts and have two heels win, and then you have no go home happy match. You know what I mean?
That's a good question. That's a. I hadn't thought about it like that, because I've been thinking to myself, well, surely Flair, why not have Flair Savage?
Right.
Why not go down that line? But I hadn't thought of it like that. But then let me throw the question out. Let's take it back a step, because we're arguing, we're talking about, well, you wouldn't have two heels win. Maybe the question needs to be raised, should Shawn go over Brett at SummerSlam? If you're preparing him to move up and take the main championship, do you want him losing to a heel at SummerSlam? Because part of the benefits, like the match that he had with Davey Boy, even though he lost the title, he came out looking better, and a lot of people have always sort of felt that sort of helped his cause, and the move up the card is how he came out of SummerSlam looking. If he loses to a heel through nefarious means on a major pay-per-view, does he come out looking as good? Because it was that sort of shock, that Bulldog reversing, blocking the victory roll and grabbing the pin after they've exhausted themselves. It's sort of, I think that helped elevate Brett. Does the same elevation happen if he gets hit with a title belt, or if Shawn grabs the tights, or uses brass knucks or whatever? Does that same elevation happen? Does Brett need to win? Maybe win by DQ or something like that, so they can have a rematch at the TV taping a couple of days later and switch it there.
That's what I'm kind of thinking, because if you look at the rest of the roster in '92, you've got Money Inc. and like the Natural Disasters with the tag straps. You get Martel. Razor's not ready yet. I don't know. That's a hard one, Dave, because there's not a ton of other options to kind of juice that card up. So I think we're kind of stuck. I can see a Brett Shawn match with Brett winning and Shawn winning the belt instead of Warrior, have Sean. See, I don't know. It's a tough one.
Because I guess I look at, the, what do you want? I always found it difficult that they did this major title change, the Flair winning the belt back from Savage 2 nights later at a TV taping. Razor gets involved at the TV taping. So you're advancing all your storylines on something that was never, and it wasn't even on prime time or Superstars. It was just put on a Coliseum video.
Right.
It was never really a major thing to see. And that's always bugged me. Why not put this on pay-per-view? Why not have that whole storyline that happened 2 nights later on pay-per-view where everyone can see it, where it gets that bigger coverage and that bigger exposure? And the flying, I agree with you that, you don't want 2 heels winning in one night. And again, where Brett's going, what do? You need to get the IC title belt off him. The
right.
Best place to do that would be on pay-per-view. That would elevate Sean, but, vice versa. The only thing I can think of is if you do run Savage Warrior, I think it's not just Flair and Perfect that need to be involved. They should have got Razor involved as well. And maybe if it was in the US, they would give the opportunity for Razor to get involved. Or do you go down the line? Do we go back to, and this is preempting where Survivor Series is going to go, but do we go back to the tag team main event idea? I mean, this is 92. This is, up till now, SummerSlam had been that highlighted tag team main event. Apart from 1990 where they didn't do it, it had been every year you had that main event of a tag team. Do you do Savage Warrior versus Flair and Razor here rather than where they went to at SummerSlam?
That's entirely possible. And then if you want the baby faces to win that match, then you can have Sean beat Brett again through, nefarious means to win the IC belt, get the belt off him, and then you can elevate Brett to win his first world title. I like that idea.
And it allows you to, Savage and Warrior can win the match, but of course, because of who they are, Flair and Razor and Perfect can then attack both of them after the match with chairs, take out the knee, do everything that they did to set up the television taping title change can all still happen. But I think it gives that better exposure to where the storyline's going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 92 is a strange year, particularly for the roster. It's a strange roster. It's very transitional, almost like 91 was very transitional as well. Yeah, you may have to if you're if SummerSlam is indeed domestic in the States, I think you have to push up Razor's debut and his vignettes and get him going and make him part of the show. I think when it was moved to Wembley and they focused more on Bulldog, I feel like they probably could have held back and did what they did with the main event with the IC belt and then everything else with that, and then they were able to kind of marinate the Razor debut till the fall. But if you do the pay-per-view in DC, I think Razor has to be pushed up a bit, and start sooner. I think he has to.
And then the flow on out of that, the question then gets raised, well, what do you do? The build up then, the flow on out of that is, where does Survivor Series go? Well, Survivor Series could have been the traditional 4-on-4 Survivor match. Bring some other guys into it, and you still could have done Warrior leaves, which he did. You still could have done the whole Perfect join Savage's Survivor Series team. So you could still deal with the other end of it. But I think if you do the tag match at SummerSlam, then you've got to look at more of the traditional Survivor Series match at Survivor Series.
Right. You could have like Flair, Razor, Shawn, and maybe it's another heel.
Papa Shango
against Brett, Savage, Perfect, and Bulldog. If you want to keep Bulldog elevated or something,
Yeah.
You could have something like that. Yeah, absolutely. So 92 is tricky. 92 is tricky because you tweak it a little bit because obviously you don't put Bulldog in the main event if it's not at Wembley. So, but the 92 roster is just so strange because you're definitely in a state of transition. Hogan's gone. Now let's go back. Let's backtrack a minute, Dave. We may be going down another hole here, but what if you coerce Hogan? Because that's the thing. If you have it domestically, I don't see how you keep Hogan out. You may need him back. You may need him back.
After the whole retirement thing at WrestleMania.
Well, Terry Funk unretired like 14 times. All right. Well, see, because the weird thing about that is, and we're going down a completely different rabbit hole here because we're talking about unretiring retirements. You had that crappy finish at WrestleMania 8, even though, Warrior's Return was kind of awesome. The end of that Warrior, Sid match is
Hogan's Sid match.
It's absolutely, the end of that Warrior Sid match is absolutely dreadful. Warrior Sid, I'm sorry, Hogan Sid. And so if SummerSlam 92 is indeed a domestic, for me anyway, domestic, if it's at the Cap Center in DC, which was the rumor, the question is, do you somehow bring Hogan back?
Do you put him against Flair?
Oh boy, here we go again.
But then you overshadow everything else on the card.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a tough one, Dave. Because again, the roster at the moment was so much in flux that I don't know what you do. I don't know what you do.
I think bringing Hogan back creates a bigger headache longer term because really I always felt SummerSlam 92 is about life after Hogan. Brett being elevated, Davey Boy essentially being elevated, Savage and Warrior doing their thing with Flair around the side. You're really trying to show that they've moved on from Hogan. And if they were to bring Hogan back, I feel it creates that where do you put him? If you don't want him in the world title match, well, all it's going to do is completely overshadow Savage Warrior. It completely undercuts what you're trying to do with Brett because people are just going to go, well, Hogan's back. Let's just put the title on Hogan. We don't need to see Brett come up the card. So I feel it damages what they were trying to do in this time period with their roster, which really felt like we're trying to transition into a new way of running things.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, probably not a good idea there. Oh, boy. All right. Well, obviously the one thing you change if SummerSlam 92 is indeed a domestic show here in the States is that you don't do Brett Bulldog because no one will care. Because really, again, as I said before, the journey that JR and I took in 92, Bulldog was barely doing anything. So, It was very weird.
He may not even make the card if it's not held in the UK.
Yeah, honestly, I agree. So, all right, well, we got it as good as we could on that one. That one was a tricky one. This one is not nearly as tricky because case study number 3, we're taking a main event completely out of the picture, in my personal opinion. But please set the table, Dave.
We're just jumping forward a couple of years, and I guess we're looking at what might possibly be one of the worst main events in the history of SummerSlam. Now, we'll battle this one with what we'll be talking about immediately following this one, but SummerSlam 94 and the Battle of the Undertakers. Quite possibly the worst match in SummerSlam history. I don't know that there are many more. Like I said, there's one match that'll rival it that we'll talk about in a minute. But I mean, this match was abysmal, and I always felt the storyline building into it was absolutely a waste of time. It was horrible. The whole idea of Ted DiBiase saying, "I brought the Undertaker in. He's my man. I'm bringing him back." When they'd already built the character of the Undertaker into this, they'd elevated him to a status during 92 once they turned him face. He'd elevated away from that concept, I felt. He really had been moved into a different realm of presentation that you just knew Undertaker was never going to be with DiBiase. And bringing in Brian Lee to be a fake Undertaker, and you got to feel sorry for him to be put in that position. It just never cut it. And then the match itself was just an overabundant waste of time. And Leslie Nielsen looking for the Undertaker throughout the show was probably the only decent part of the storyline that ever existed.
That's right. Yeah.
So we want to remove that match, that main event. And so the two questions that come out of that are, who should the Undertaker face in his return to the company? And what should the main event of SummerSlam 94 be? Now, personally, and I think you might be in line with me on this one, Scott, I don't think there's any doubt that the first mistake the company made was not putting the Bret Owen Hart match as the main event of SummerSlam.
Absolutely. That chaos afterwards with Bulldog back and Neidhart and them trying to climb the cage after Neidhart and Owen locked the door and beat the shit out of Bret in the cage, and they're trying to climb it. I mean, it was just everything about that was awesome. That absolutely should have been the last match of the night. No doubt about it.
And I wonder if that was part of the problem for this Battle of the Undertaker thing. Is I think the crowd had just been worked into a frenzy that nothing could follow. I mean, the match. Talk about what you want. And I know the Bret Owen title match, that cage match, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of different opinions about that match. Personally, I like it. It might not be the greatest match in history, but I like it. I like the storyline because you've locked these two brothers in the cage, but all Owen wants to do is win. And to win, he's got to get out. All Bret wants to do is keep his title. He wants to get out. They're not blood feuding. They're trying to tell a story of getting out and winning the title and being the best Hart. So I don't mind the match, and the end of it is great. So I wonder if they've built the crowd into such a frenzy that nothing could follow it. Almost like Rock Hogan at WrestleMania 19. It doesn't matter what came on after it. It doesn't matter how good Hunter and Jericho was going to be in the ring. It could never follow that match. And yep. I don't think anything could follow the Hart match. I think it should have gone on last.
I agree 100%. By the way, it's 18, not 19.
18, sorry.
19 was actually 19 had just as awesome a Hogan match, because I will contend that Hogan-Vince street fight is so damn entertainingly awesome. I put it up against any other Vince match ever. And And that Rock Hogan matches, that Rock Austin match is pretty great. Actually, 19 is just a great show. But anyway, that's another show. I don't think there's any doubt that that you put Bret and Owen last. I don't see. It was a great feud. It was the top feud all year in the company, going back to Survivor Series 93, and then the 94 Rumble in Providence, which I actually watched last night, actually, over at Mr. Rozzero's house. For some reason, we watched the 94 Rumble because he was there. So, you know, and everything there. And then you had, you know, 10 and the King of the Ring. And it was the backbone show of the year, backbone feud of the year. So I don't see why you don't have it last. To answer your second question, if I may, who does Taker face? May I answer that question, sir?
Absolutely, because I think that's the bigger question.
Yep. Very easy. I think you move up a match from Survivor Series, and that's where you get your rematch with Yokozuna. You put it there. You tell everyone, you know, because you go back to the Rumble, and Yoko and the 97 heels, they all, you know, threw him in the casket, and then he lifted up from the heavens or the hells or whatever it was supposed to be. And that's where you get your Yoko rematch. All summer, he's taunting. He wants his world title back. He says, I got to beat The Undertaker. I killed The Undertaker. He's not coming back. You know, he's done. I killed him in January. He's not coming back. This is a big joke. You know, right now my quest is to once again, you know, I'm going to take on, you know, what I would have done. See, here's what I would have done. Doing a little extension here, Dave. So bear with me. I would have, even though Backlund was an awesome heel, I would have skipped the Backlund stuff. What I would have done is had Bret and Owen, Yoko, and Taker, and then at Survivor Series have Yoko and Bret, even though Taker beat Yoko. You have a Bret-Yoko rematch. And then if you want to put the title on Diesel, figure it out somewhere. But that's another episode for another day. But I would have moved up from Survivor Series. It doesn't have to be a casket match. But I would have moved up and had the rematch between Yoko and Taker at SummerSlam. That's what I would have done.
I think that makes the most sense. It ties in with what like you said, what happened at the Rumble, and it ties in. He's the man that got rid of him, and you could still tie DiBiase into the storyline. DiBiase tries to bring Taker back. I've got the money. Taker obviously doesn't want a part of it, and so you know. DiBiase puts a bounty on his head, or tells Yokozuna, "I've got, here's the bonus. You beat him, whether it's a casket match or whatever match, and here's the bonus money." And so coming out of that, Cornette and Fuji can be, reminding Yokozuna of the money that they're all gonna share, and they can talk it all up. It certainly seems the most logical idea, and always, again, it astounds me, why was Yokozuna not on that card anyway? He'd just been the dominant champion for 12 months. He lost the title after wrestling 2 matches at WrestleMania, and he's not on the SummerSlam card, not in any way. You're not giving him any opportunity to rehab. He's wrestling all through the house shows. He's still all over TV. So it's not like he's injured. It's not like he needs a break. They just, I don't get the booking idea sometimes. Why are you leaving these guys that are the draws off the show?
Mm-hmm.
Off the show. Even if they wanted to do Taker, why did they not have Yokozuna squashing someone else? Just to put the heat back on him, show that he's still the dominant guy, and he's whether it be Taker, Brett, whoever, they've still got to deal with him.
Yeah. No, I have no problem with that at all. And again, it extends you into the back end of '94, and I still think, and we actually, you were discussed quite often over the weekend, Dave, in my visit to my PIC's resort, because we were watching the '94 Rumble. We were talking about Razor, and I mentioned our episode that you and I did on Scott Hall, and we talked about the possibility of Razor becoming world champion. And that's something you could think about, maybe having Diesel keep the IC belt at SummerSlam, and then maybe you have Razor turn heel and have him beat Brett at Survivor Series 94, and then work something out with Shawn, and maybe have Razor Shawn rematch at WrestleMania 11, something like that. But we're going way off the rails. But anyway, my point is, I think that the best opponent for Taker in his return that SummerSlam was Yoko. I think he was the one who took him out. That was the storyline at the beginning of the year. I feel you close the storyline, skip the Underfaker bullshit, because that was just absolute nonsense. And if it was just simply to give DiBiase something to do, that's a fucking stupid excuse to put some shit storyline together.
And the thing is, if they want it to be something tied with DiBiase, there were better options on the card. I mean, you could have put Bam Bam Bigelow in that match.
Yes.
I mean, Bam Bam is one of DiBiase's guys by this point. If you want it to focus around DiBiase being annoyed that Taker wouldn't take his money, then have Taker wrestle Bam Bam. Bam Bam would have got a decent match out of Taker. You would have had it earlier in the card, wouldn't have to have gone in a main event. Bigelow could take the loss. I mean, he was losing to everyone by this point, but he would always have been believable enough that, he looks tough. He looks threatening, Bam Bam was always believable enough that you could have put that match on and people would have at least accepted that, this is probably the best guy DiBiase has to take on The Undertaker.
It's funny, Dave, because last night when we were in our little powwow outside of the Rosero compound, we were talking about some other guys in '94 that got totally underutilized, and I think one of the guys is Bigelow. We were watching the match with Tatanka at Rumble '94, and he's pretty over as a heel, and he's a good worker. He did an awesome. I never noticed the taunt that he does on Tatanka. You know, Tatanka does that little dance in the ring with the.
Yep.
He boots. He's doing the dance in the middle of this match, and I think Bigelow boots him or something. And then Bigelow taunts the dance. And I'm like, wow, that's great heel work right there. I think Bigelow was a completely underutilized talent in 1994. And I think he's a guy that you could have elevated a little bit and been a guy that maybe chased Taker too, If anything, I would have probably transitioned Yoko off of Fuji and Cornette and maybe put Yoko with DiBiase then and made DiBiase's corporation, which was hurting anyway, maybe a little bit more teeth. But that's just my opinion.
But to be fair, I mean, you compare Cornette to DiBiase, there's no comparison.
That is true.
Unfortunately, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
it would have just. I think it would have just taken Yoko down a notch.
Yeah, you might be right.
Yeah. But certainly the hired gun idea, like I said, DiBiase paying Yoko and Cornette. And so, the idea that you could have three managers out there, Cornette and Fuji are out there and DiBiase's out there because he's paying them, it puts that image over. But in the end, you still know that Yoko's with Corny and Fuji.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, but anyway, I definitely think, I mean, in an alternate universe, that Taker Faker storyline is just trash, and it made no fucking sense, and it was just absolute garbage, and I would have just totally destroyed it and got rid of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, we did our best on that one. Case study number 4, we are really going to have to get our caps on this because this one's going to take a lot of juice, Dave. What is our fourth case study?
Well, we're going. We talked about. I mentioned earlier the worst main event in SummerSlam history is Taker Faker, closely rivaled by probably the main event of the following year, which was Diesel versus Mabel, in what is quite possibly the worst SummerSlam card in history. I don't think there's any doubt about it. If you ask anyone what is the worst SummerSlam ever, SummerSlam 95 comes to mind.
Yep.
It is a terrible card with a lot of poor matches. And so the question's always, can 95 be saved? I mean, there's a lot of argument. I mean, we're talking about a year where the roster was in a bit of a really bad way. And what do you do? The company had made some decisions to turn, they turned Shawn face earlier in the year, so they had no real major heels running the gambit. You've got Diesel as your champion. You've got Shawn. You've got Brett. You've got Razor. You've got all these guys that sort of vying for the number one babyface role. What do you do? Where do you go? And SummerSlam 95 is just a horrendous event. So let's have a look. Could this event have been improved, or how could it have been improved? I want to start right at the top, and I want to propose that Mabel should never have been in the championship match. Where do you go with Diesel? I want to put it out there, and this is going to tie back to our previous episode, which you just mentioned before. But I want to throw it out there. Maybe the main event of SummerSlam 95 should have been Diesel versus Razor. And my rationale is this. Firstly, Razor is no longer in the IC title picture. Shawn has got the belt. So Razor has a lot of freedom to be utilized in various ways. Secondly, the storyline could be built on the premise of Razor saying, I beat Diesel last year at SummerSlam 94. I'm the only man who has pinned Diesel for a championship belt. I am the man who can do it again. So you can have a build that ties into the babyface elements and yet at the same time possibly start a heel turn for Razor. But it doesn't need to happen either. You could have him show heelish elements all around wanting to take that title. I think Diesel Razor would have been a hell of a main event, which brings stories to full circle. You can have Diesel retain the title. They could shake hands afterwards. Yep, you got me this year. Last year it was this year it's you. I think that match would have been much more entertaining and a better overall story than what we got.
I'm looking at the card right now on Wikipedia, and this just sucks. I mean, when you've got to stick Barry Horowitz on a card, or as Mr. Perfect affectionately called him, Barry Horriblewitz, you're in a lot of trouble. Let's take a look at the main players. So you've got Diesel, Razor, Shawn, Brett, Taker. Let's look at those 5 guys. What do you do with them? Because Taker wrestles Kama, and the storyline was they melted down the urn, which is fucking stupid.
Taker was in the middle of the feud with the corporation.
Over his fucking urn.
Over the urn.
I mean, good grief.
Yeah, it was a horrible storyline. It never worked. But that's where they had Taker in that mix at that time.
Yeah, it just crap. I like Diesel Razor. I love Diesel Razor. What about Sean? Who do you elevate?
Well, the original, I wonder, I mean, storylines that have been happening from Mania, Sean's face turn happened because he was attacked by Sid. And they never had any major blow off. And we know that Sean can take Sid to a decent match. We know Sid can't work with Diesel. We've seen that twice. But we know Sean has a history of being able to take Sid to a match. Do you have him face Sid in an IC title match, sort of revenge for, Sid's attack on him? Do you bring Dean Douglas into the mix? Now, our boy Shane has just arrived, and he was doing the whole backstage evaluation thing on this night. Do you put him in that match?
The pulling of Sid, I get that. I mean, that was a shoot decision, because let's be honest, they had already realized that this card was garbage, and I feel like us getting Sean Razor 2 was supposed to be a consolation prize for having that shit main event. Why not? Why not? You don't want to do Diesel Brett because you're gonna take care of that at Survivor Series. Right. So you're not gonna do that now. I like Diesel Razor. I would have done Sean Sid. And what about
Brett? Should have had the blow-off match with the King at this card and not it in your house.
Right, and make it a cage match.
The Kiss My Foot cage match.
Oh, God.
Whatever, but you know what I mean. But this should have been the blow-off. They did it in your house, but they should have done it at SummerSlam, because at least with the King, while he really wasn't a player, there's more heat behind it than Brett wrestling Isaac Yankem or Hakushi or John Pierre Lafitte or anyone else on the roster. Right. At least the storyline, there's a back storyline there that they were always able to come back to, and they've been playing it off for the last few months. They should have just done the blow-off match at SummerSlam and not it in your house. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Did we really need? I understand that Vince liked Glenn Jacobs, but doing the whole dentist thing was so stupid. I would have just waited, even though I did get a great San Diego Comic-Con limited edition figure out of it that I am staring at right now. But it just it's just so crazy that they had all these weird gimmicky things. I don't know. I feel like they cluttered the mid card with all of this weird schlocky junk, and didn't really think about it, Jarrett was really, the problem was Jarrett was a top flight mid card heel at that point, and then he just disappeared.
Yeah,
and then he came back, obviously, but
he'd only just bailed. He wasn't coming back for a little while.
Right.
So, but here's the thing: if you're wanting to elevate someone like that, they're bringing the whole Isaac Yankem thing and law. If you're wanting to bring someone in, why not put Dean Douglas in that match with Brett? Why not? If Jerry wants to bring someone in, why can't he bring his school teacher friend or the guy who he's the most educated man? I mean, Brett and Douglas would have been a better match than Brett and Isaac Yankem. I mean, Shane's coming off that run. I call him Shane, Dean Douglas. I mean, he's Shane Douglas. He's coming off that ECW run. He's been the top guy in ECW. That's what got him the contract with the company. Why not put him in a match? He doesn't have to win the match. Brett can still win the match, but Douglas is going to come out looking a hell of a lot better in a match against Bret Hart than standing around just criticizing people. If you want him to put someone into an elevation spot that's still going to lose to Bret, I feel Shane Douglas in that role could have benefited because he could have at least had a decent match with Bret. Glenn Jacobs wasn't ready. He wasn't ready for the spot they put him in. At least Douglas would have been able to go hold for hold and move for move with Bret for a while. And it would have been a much better match to watch.
Yes, I agree. I like the Diesel Razor main event. I really do. I like that idea. You could have maybe did a Bret Taker test match here, perhaps. Because Bret really tanks that title reign that he has between when he beats Diesel at Survivor Series 95 when he loses to Shawn in the Iron Man. Because, that match with Taker at Rumble 96 should have been a better match than it was. And Bret kind of paint-by-numbered it almost he didn't even hide it. So I think maybe we get a more... I mean, obviously they would have better matches in 97. But again, we got a problem because the roster is so devoid of talent right now.
I mean, another thing that they did on this card, which in the build to this card, which astonishes me, we've just highlighted you've got a real lack of depth in this roster. And so what do? 1 week before SummerSlam, they take the team that they built as their number one babyface team in Luger and Bulldog, and they turn Bulldog heel to start to prepare him to face Diesel after SummerSlam. And in the process, they killed off their tag team title match. Owen and Yoko versus Allied Powers doesn't happen. Right. Because Bulldog turned heel 1 week before SummerSlam. Why not hold that Why not hold that heel turn off until the night after SummerSlam? Why not have Owen and Yoko beat Luger and Bulldog? That would have been a decent match. Not over the top, but Owen and Bulldog would have been able to, do some good stuff in the ring. Would have done good stuff in the ring. We know that. You could have Luger take the loss, and then the next night, Bulldog's blaming him and walks out on him and does the attack on Diesel, and off you go,
Right.
Bulldog's on his heel run then. Why does it need to happen 1 week before SummerSlam?
Yeah, that was kind of a strange time thing as well. Who does a major heel turn before a pay-per-view and do nothing about it and do nothing with it? Like who does that? That's bizarre.
So if you keep that match on the card, Owen and Yoko versus the Allied Powers, you have HBK Wrestling Sid, you've got Hart versus either Jerry Lawler or Dean Douglas, Diesel versus Razor Ramon. You keep 1-2-3 Kid versus Hakushi because that was a great little match.
Yes, it was.
And all of a sudden, you've got a card that has the potential to be quite good.
Yeah. And then that Diesel Razor match could be a banger of a main event, I mean, yes, the roster was very thin, so it was really hard to kind of fit everybody in. But you did have a pretty good top-heavy roster, though. You had a good amount of main eventers. You have Taker. You have, Shawn, you have Diesel, you have Razor.
They're all baby faces.
Yeah.
And that's why, doing Diesel Razor, you've got the opportunity then. You can turn Razor if you want, and you can carry that feud on for another couple of months, or you can keep him babyface and do what they did, and it works either way. But I think Razor would have been enough. He's the right guy to sort of do the whole, I want the gold, and if he turned heel, everyone would have accepted it. And if he does the handshake at the end of it, you're still going to be entertained.
Right. The perfect. I didn't even think of that, Dave, until you just said that all these top flight main eventers are all faces. And they have that same problem a year later when Sid was champion, but you had Vader, Taker, Brett, and Shawn all at the same time at the end of '96. So it's not easy. I don't envy them, particularly this time when they didn't have a ton of money yet to get back in the groove. So that's another one that's very hard to. But I most definitely would have turned Razor heel and done Diesel Razor in the main event for the world title. So it's 2 straight SummerSlams. Who gives a shit? You did 2 straight Manias with Brett and Yoko. Who cares?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the problem. There's no good. It's kind of like the problem we had with when we did our episode with Warrior in '90. There's just no heels. There's no good heels. You turned everybody babyface early in the year, like Shawn, and now you're stuck with what? Kama, Dean Douglas. You had a pretty good heel in Jarrett, and he's gone.
But even then, if they'd let Douglas come in with the character he played in ECW,
right,
it would have been it would have been something
franchise.
It might have really been something that would have been an uppercard. He might not have been the ultimate main eventer, but it certainly would have been believable uppercard stuff at a time that they needed it, rather than shackle him with the Dean gimmick.
Right. That was idiotic, but it was 1995 WWF, and they weren't thinking outside the box like that.
That's right.
I mean, Jesus, Dave. Earlier that year at the King of the Ring, which is an entirely different pile of dog shit, in the middle of Philly, when everyone's chanting ECW and no one understands why. Well, we understand why. Vince didn't understand why. Why are we getting ECW chants? Because this pay-per-view is fucking crap. I mean, we may have to do an episode going down the looking glass of just pick every crappy pay-per-view. Maybe we could steal Ben Locke's wrestling chicken salad list. And go through all theirs. Yeah. Get through all that slop. But anyway, so yeah, I think at least getting rid of Mabel, because that's just slop, and putting a Diesel Razor main event, put Sid and Shawn back on, because I think that match would have been very good. And maybe have Brett Taker in like a number 1 contenders match.
Oh yeah, that could be your build.
Winner gets the
shot at Survivor Series.
Winner gets the shot at Survivor Series. And then, Taker could be taken out by the corporation or, whatever. I don't know. But yeah, but if we're looking for better matches, and tweak that card, I think that's the best we're going to get. Again, we're dealing, just like in '94, pretty much the same roster. We're dealing with a depleted roster with people not in their right spots to make a good enough card. So I think that's the best we could do. But I think Diesel Razor is 700 times better than Diesel Mabel. That's for sure. Mabel getting a title shot was just absolute lunacy, Dave. Lunacy, I tell you. All right. So there you go. I think we tweaked that about as best as we could. I remember, seeing Bertha Faye beat Alundra Blaze was probably pretty dumb. But, yeah, I mean, that's about as close as we're going to get. There's not much more we're going to be able to tweak with that. So hopefully we made that a better SummerSlam. The smallest of tweaks. So, all right. Case study number 5, Dave, which I find much easier than these last two. But I guess that depends on your point of view. What do we got?
All right. Well, we're going to get ourselves out of the 90s. We're going to come into post 2000, post Monday Night Wars. We're going to jump all the way to 2003, and I guess I want to give you the opportunity to bring your boy, your interest into the realm of Through the Looking Glass. I've been waiting to do this for a while.
Okay. I
want to look at the 03 the SummerSlam 2003 main event. We have the main event that we got is the Elimination Chamber, and I'm gonna be clear. I don't think it's a bad main event by any stretch. I don't think it's a shocking, Taker, Faker, Diesel, Mabel sort of level match. But there's a lot of criticism as to why this was the main event of SummerSlam when everything had been pointing to a Goldberg Triple H
showdown
main event. Showdown.
Yep.
And so I guess there's the question. Should that have been our main event? Now, I get that there were some injury issues, but I'm not so sure the injury came in before they made the announcement and if the injury came in after. But I've always felt that the storyline they had built in that company since Goldberg's arrival, everything pointed that Goldberg should have been meeting Hunter at SummerSlam 2003. And I guess, let me put it to you. What do you think of that, Scott? Should that have been the main event of SummerSlam in 2003? Should Goldberg and Hunter been facing each other for the world title?
I don't do this very often, Dave, and it makes me sad when I have to do this, but I have to disagree with you. I'm okay keeping the Elimination Chamber. The match itself is not the problem. The way the match was booked was the problem. I didn't mind an Elimination Chamber. I didn't mind having those guys in there. What they should have done was Goldberg should have come out first and just destroyed everybody. Open a chamber, spear. Open the next chamber, spear. Open the next chamber, spear. Open the next chamber, spear. Jackhammer. Triple H is last. His comes off. He's staring at Goldberg. Goldberg's looking at him. It's your turn, bitch. Get out here. Just come on, man. Time to get to the listening to the learning tree. I'm here. You're next. That's what he should do. He should have been screaming at the chamber, "You're next." And Triple H is shitting his pants in the chamber. And then Goldberg boots the door open, does what it, and just absolutely destroys Triple H and wins the world title there. So I do believe Goldberg should have won the world title. What I don't have a problem with is the fact that we did a chamber. I have no problem with the rematch I don't have a problem with a Triple H Goldberg match at Unforgiven, but you're in Phoenix, you're in a big show, big venue, hot crowd. You just should have had, you might as well have just had Goldberg win there instead of wasting that chance and then get kind of the throwaway title shot at Unforgiven. You're in the middle of this sparse crowd in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Triple H is gimpy from a bad bad groin, which is why he was wearing the infamous bike shorts. And the match is not good. So, respectfully, Dave, I agree Goldberg should have won the title that night at SummerSlam, but I don't have a problem keeping the chamber. The problem is not the match. The problem is how the match was booked. And it simply, very simply put, Goldberg should have just destroyed everybody. The place would have gone batshit. Triple H is the last one in the chamber, and he's looking at him, and Goldberg's just yelling through the glass, "You're next. You're next. You're next." And Triple H is sitting there shitting his pants, shitting his bike shorts. So, Flair's trying to keep him from opening the thing. Orton's like trying to, and Evolution just gets the shit beat out of it. Goldberg should have just laid waste to everybody in the ring that night at SummerSlam in Phoenix and walked out the World Heavyweight Champion.
Look, I've got to agree with you there. And as I said, it's not the worst concept of a main event. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Batista was injured at this time, wasn't he? He wasn't a part of SummerSlam. Evolution.
If you watch the Evolution episode of the Ruthless Aggressive series on Peacock, or in your case, Dave, the network, they both got hurt in a Dudley Boys match. Of course, everyone thinks that it was on purpose because Bubba Ray's a dick. Orton came back first. His injury was not as serious as Batista's was, because Batista comes back to cash in the bounty, which I love that storyline because being a Crockett fan, I love bounties. So Triple H stole that straight out of his boy Harley Race in 1983.
So he comes back just after SummerSlam. Is that correct?
Yes. Actually, no. He comes back, I think, October.
Okay.
He comes back in October.
All right. Because I'm looking at. I asked that question because I'm looking at, like you said, how should this match have looked? And I like the idea of Goldberg creaming, running through everyone. But when you look at who's in the match, I wonder if they should have started. I can't remember who starts it, but if Jericho and HBK, they start the match and they can you're going to get 5 minutes of back and forth all over the place, putting it all out there, putting it all on the line. And then when the first gong goes off, it's Goldberg who comes out. And then it starts to, like you said, he can start to lay carnage. He can probably straight out of line, spear Jericho out of his boots, straight up, pin him 1, 2, 3. Maybe a little bit of back and forth with HBK. Takes him out 1, 2, 3. Then you work through Nash, because Nash was in that one. And then he's left with Orton and Hunter. He's left with Evolution, Flair on the outside. Orton comes out. Maybe it doesn't last long. Orton, whatever. Orton gets beat just before it's time for Triple H's thing to open. And what you were saying, he's banging on it, he's threatening. Triple H is scared to death. And as the referees open the cage door to get Orton out of the chamber, Flair rushes in, and Flair comes in with a steel chair for a moment and pounds on the back of Goldberg. Maybe Orton turns around, jumps back in. We get a triple team for a couple of minutes. Hunter now all confident because Goldberg's down. You get a triple team for a couple of minutes, and then Goldberg makes the comeback again. Spears Flair, spears Orton, throws him out of the ring. Flair turns back into chicken shit. I don't want to have anything to do with you. Spear, pin, middle of the ring. It's all done and dusted. And Goldberg has had to overcome the full evolution in the process of getting that win.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what you do. I agree. Yeah.
And then you come out of that, and then you need to again, what WWE have this little history of is not really following up very well. Goldberg should have gone on a rampage. after that. And Hunter has his rematch, but almost Hunter doesn't want. He wants the rematch, but he doesn't want the rematch because he maybe the bounty needs to come in earlier, and he starts paying people off to take Goldberg out, to do anything he can to try and get Goldberg weakened before they have their rematch in ring. But yeah, it certainly it would have looked more impressive for Goldberg to go on a rampage both in that match and in the fallout. Getting some really fast, quick. I mean, victories, because that's where the aura of Goldberg came from. It came from those quick victory after victory after victory. And we talked about that when we did our Goldberg episode previously, when we talked about the streak and Starcade. We talked about that. But it was always a shame that WWE looked at it in a different light. And then when Hunter and Goldberg met one-on-one, it was this longer drawn. Even when Goldberg won the match, it really didn't seem conclusive.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it would have helped more, I think, if we'd had that conclusive week, and that, tearing through 5 other people in an elimination chamber would have been about as conclusive as you can get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then if you want to do whatever you do through the fall, and you have the 2 matches at Unforgiven and Survivor Series, and then, Triple H wins it at Armageddon to set up 2004, that's fine. But what they did at SummerSlam was criminal. And because then, again, that it should have been won in a singles match. Goldberg needs to win it. That's fucking stupid. And then Triple H, who's gimpy anyway, and then they have a very average match at Unforgiven. Goldberg wins, and people are kind of caring, but they're like, yeah, but he should have won last month. Yeah. But that's what I think solves that problem. I think the only thing you have to do, you keep the match, because I don't have a problem with the chamber, but you have Goldberg just absolutely destroy everybody. Not even make it close.
Yeah.
And just have him taunting Triple H while Triple H is hiding in the clear chamber. You're next. You're next. You're next. Like just screaming at him. Open the damn door and take your beating like a man. And Triple H just can't handle it. And Orton's trying to get in the chamber to say, like, I think the visuals would have been amazing.
Yep.
So that's about it. The rest of SummerSlam 03, I mean, the rest of that card's not
a bad card.
Yeah. I mean, it was the end of the awesome SummerSlams, because pretty much the previous 6 SummerSlams from 97 to 02, all 6 of those SummerSlams are amazing. Amazing. If you look at every card from SummerSlam 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, and 2002, that was one pay-per-view during the Attitude Era that was consistently great. And 03 kind of broke the streak, because 03 was not great. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't at the level of those other ones. So I think the only change you really need to do is to just rebook the chamber and have Goldberg just absolutely destroy everybody, taunting Triple H, boot the chamber open like they did, and just have him just destroy him.
Yep.
That's really what you do. What else? Who else is on that card? Is that Big Show, Kurt, Brock, or is that just Kurt Brock? I think it's just Kurt Brock. Taker.
Just bring it up here. I've got it here. 03 is Kane RVD, Kurt Brock, Eddie faces Benoit, Tajiri, and Rhino in a 4-way for the US title. Shane McMahon faces Eric Bischoff. Undertaker beats Albert, and La Resistance over the Dudley Boys.
Yep. So not bad. Not a bad card. Not great. Not as good as the others, but not terrible. Not terrible.
Well, especially when you've got 6 of your top players all in the one match in the main event. I mean, when you've got Jericho, Shawn, Orton, Hunter, and Goldberg all in the main event, along with Kevin Nash, who shouldn't have been in the main events at that point. But when you've got so many people in one match, you've got it opens up the depth. And I think with what they had, I think that's not a bad undercard.
No, and I've noticed that most of our problems tonight, or most of our issues that we're fixing through the looking glass, are roster depth problems. That seems to be the most common denominator of all the things we've needed to fix, is roster depth and creative depth, meaning, like in the case of 95, all the heavy hitters are baby faces. How many babyface matches you got to have? You can't have too many of them.
Well, I don't know that argument can be made for our last case study.
No.
I don't know that roster depth and too many faces on one side of the roster is going to be the answer in our last case study.
Yes. So, what do we got? Case study number 6, the last one, and I think this is one a lot of people want us to fix. So,
all right, we're going to jump ahead to 2010. You talked before about criminal outcomes in a main event, that it was criminal that Goldberg didn't go over in that SummerSlam 2003 main event. Well, I think when you talk about criminal outcomes of a main event, 2010 is probably up there as maybe the worst example. The Nexus versus Team John Cena, I think would be the best way to put it. And what is a very hard to understand rationale for an outcome for a match. So just talking about what we can talk about where things go in a moment, but where we think they could have gone in a moment. But let's just, if we look at the build, this wasn't a bad build. This was a good build. You had the Nexus come out. You had the all these guys out of NXT turn up on Raw, beat the crap out of everyone. Daniel Bryan chokes the ring announcer, gets fired as a result. But you have Nexus arrive on Raw and go on a rampage and beat the crap out of everyone. And you start to build to this, this idea of, we're the young guys, we want our spots, we want you to take notice of us and respect us, and you build to this big main event at SummerSlam, where the Nexus are meeting almost the entire main event roster of Raw. John Cena, Edge, Chris Jericho, John Morrison. I don't know that R-Truth is a
right.
A main event. Bret Hart. In this little comeback stretch. I know he only wrestled the one time. He didn't really wrestle, but Bret Hart at least is a name. So you've got a very big name, high level, high caliber talent on John Cena's team. And of course, the returning Daniel Bryan on his team. And on the other side, you've got all these young guys. And the way the match plays out, the Nexus are getting the better of the established guys for most of the match. And you end up in this. Now, I'll circle back to Daniel Bryan. Let's just do a general overview. We end up at the point where it is essentially almost 3-on-2, 3-on-1 almost. But, Cena is getting the snot beaten out of him. He's been beaten up in the match. He then gets attacked by Jericho and Edge at ringside, and they beat him down. Daniel Bryan gets eliminated. You're left with John Cena on his own against Wade Barrett, against Justin Gabriel. I think Heath Slater just got eliminated, but you've got Cena, who's been beaten up by main event guys on the concrete floor. He looks out of it, and then he ends up making the Superman comeback, beating both guys, and the Nexus are dead and buried by the end of SummerSlam with nowhere to go. They've just absolutely buried these guys by having them all lose clean to John Cena. And it begs the question, why, and what really should it have looked like? Because I think what they tried to do afterwards is continue this Wade Barrett, John Cena storyline, but it had no juice because Cena had already Supermaned, had already overcome the odds and got the win. The one good thing I do like out of this main event, and for all the criticism the WWE have taken over time, when I look back on this match and when I had a little bit of a look through it in the last, earlier today preparing for the thing, Daniel Bryan is actually booked really well in this match.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Bryan is made to look like a star. He makes a surprise return, gets the first victory in an elimination match within 30 seconds, looks dominant whenever he's in the ring, and is only eliminated when his nemesis, The Miz, runs in, hits him with the Money in the Bank briefcase, and allows them to pin him. So, for all the criticism the booking of Daniel Bryan has suffered over the years, his return to the company at this event was actually very well done. Daniel Bryan looked good in this main event, but this main event wasn't just about Daniel Bryan. It was about the rest of Nexus, and they looked like chumps.
Yeah. This is one of the very, very few times in the history of John Cena's career that he comes off looking like an asshole. It does not happen that often. Usually the issues he has is because the fans can't stand him. But this is the first time where the fans had a legitimate beef, because it seemed like the goal was to clean out Nexus and focus almost strictly on Wade Barrett, who was, of course, the leader. And he would be booked moderately strong throughout the fall into the winter. So what do? Yeah, clean the rest of them out. That's almost like what they pretty much did, is focus on Wade Barrett by getting rid of these other bums. And that was a terrible idea. I'm not saying that Nexus needed to win, but Nexus should have at least looked better than they did. I'm not saying they needed a win. And honestly, John Cena should probably not have gotten the last pin. I would have given it to Daniel Bryan. But
I'm not sure I agree with you there. We're going to get a game. I normally agree with you. I think Barrett should have got the win.
Really? Okay.
I think Barrett should have got the win. The way they had presented Wade Barrett from when it started, and I watched that. So I remember watching that season of NXT. Wade Barrett was always positioned as the star of NXT. Daniel Bryan, we all know how that worked out, and we know that they didn't really want him. I think they underestimated the fan reaction to Daniel Bryan. But Wade Barrett, he was coached by Chris Jericho. He seconded Jericho to the ring for a short period of time. He won NXT. He's positioned as the leader, and he had a ton of upside. He was everything that the WWE, that Vince McMahon at the time liked. He was tall, handsome, muscular, could work in the ring, and he could talk. So you had a guy that ticked every box that the WWE liked for a star. And if you're going to build a longer-term storyline of Wade Barrett and John Cena, which is exactly where they went, I think Barrett should have got the victory. I'm not saying that every other member of Nexus should have survived because, as you said, most of them were chumps. Ryback, I know he wasn't Ryback at the time. Ryback would eventually, they were able to work him, Skip Sheffield, I think it was initially. They were able to work him into a better character down the track, but he wasn't there yet. Darren Young, David Otunga, they're just cannon fodder. Yep. Justin Gabriel and Heath Slater are the last two with Barrett. They were good in ring, and they were good as almost that backup. That's where it should have. I think Nexus should have centered around those three, and Barrett should have got the win, because then that allows you to build the story moving forward. That he's beaten Cena, and he wants to prove himself as the guy. He could have got it through any cheap means. He doesn't have to beat Cena clean. He can hit him with a chair. He can, Slater and Gabriel can continue the assault. They created the scenario in the match already, because they had Edge and Jericho assault Cena and beat him down. So the storyline of the match created the opportunity for Barrett to get the win. But Barrett taps out to the STF at the end of the night. It's not even a fluke pin. It's a tap out in the center of the ring. And that makes him look like a chump. It makes him look second rate, because where do you go from there? He's submitted. It just, from a fan's perspective, immediately you just knew Barrett's never going to be able to beat Cena. But if he wins in a tag match with the scenario they've presented, that they set up in the match as it was, it allows you to build moving out. Barrett can talk about how much better he is, and he won NXT and he's proven it, and he can have the backup, and then they can meet in a match on Raw, and the rest of Nexus can get involved. You can do a 7-on-1 or a 3-on-1 or whatever beatdown of Cena to build to an eventual match down the line where you put him in a cage, you put him 1-on-1, and that's where you let Cena get the win. You let Cena get his revenge on this young guy who's been torturing him for a couple of months. But not this night, because everything in the lead up to this night was about, the storyline was where young guys, Barrett was saying it, we're the future. All these guys have been holding, not letting us get a shot. We want a shot. We're going to take our shot, and we're going to prove we deserve to be here. That's the storyline. Right. And then in the end, they don't get it. He doesn't get the win. Heels need to get wins sometimes to allow them to show that when they're claiming something, they've at least got some validity and reasoning for making their statements. And that's what makes it even better when they lose down the track. And when it's 7-on-7 and then eventually 3-on-1, you could have let Barrett get the win.
Right. Yeah. I don't. I like Barrett, and I'm glad he got the push in the fall to get title shots. I still feel like Daniel Bryan needed some kind of redemption, but
that could have come down the line too, because Bryan was booked strong. Yeah. He was getting wins, and The Miz took him out with the briefcase. So Bryan's elimination was, it gives you that sense of, if The Miz hadn't interfered and attacked him, then Bryan probably would have won the match. And that's why I don't have a problem with that element of his storyline. Because you can come back to that later. You can come back to Daniel Bryan. He can beat The Miz, and then he can come back to Wade Barrett and go, now it's your turn, right? I'm coming for you now.
Okay. All right. I'll pick up what you're putting down. Yeah, I'll pick up what you're putting down on that. I mean, that card as a whole is not good. 2010 is such a strange year. I feel like they didn't do a ton of preparation after WrestleMania 26 when Shawn's gone. Because then we get stuck in the Kane world title feud with Taker, and those matches are just gross. you feel like anything involving the Nexus should have been better and needed to be better booked long term for the good of the company, because 2010 is such a black hole. And yeah, that didn't happen. Maybe, because I don't know when this happens. Does it happen in the fall? When does Punk join the Nexus?
It's after this, because it's he's in the Straight Edge Society gimmick still. He doesn't join the Nexus until just before a few weeks before the Rumble, because he was on commentary, and then sort of he'd been doing commentary, and then got involved as they were killing, sort of dismantling the Nexus and splitting them up, and then at the Rumble, he's sort of got the core back, the new Nexus backing him up. But he was still in the Straight Edge Society at this SummerSlam. This is when the Straight Edge Society, him, Gallows, and Mercury lost a handicap match to the Big Show.
I would have had him join on this night.
Ooh.
And I would have had him help. You can't end the night with the Nexus winning clean, because they haven't done that all year. What I would have done is I would have had Punk join that night.
Oh, so sort of end the Straight Edge Society, and he just disregards them, and he's going to come and save the Nexus.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah, I think that could work. Because by the time Punk joins, the Nexus is shit.
Yes.
So I would have just
because they've been buried.
Right. So I would have just had the Nexus. I would have had Punk join, and Punk kind of directs Barrett towards his title shots and kind of leads the Nexus to controlling the programming kind of thing. Almost like the NWO, except on a lesser scale. That's what I would have done.
Absolutely.
So
that would have worked well. I'm
not against. No, it's okay. I'm not against. Every time I think about it, I have another thought that pops in my head. I'm not against Barrett winning, so don't think I was. I like Barrett a lot. But I think I'm starting to. I'm starting to swayed. You're starting to sway me on the Daniel Bryan can get his back down the line. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's really interesting, because you look at, like I said, I feel they killed the Nexus dead, right? Like you just said, the Nexus was dead by the time Punk took over. I feel they were dead coming out of this event. They were killed stone dead in this match, is my opinion. The interesting thing is, you look, with the talent they had in there, they had the opportunity to use the Nexus to have a really sort of to build around them, and they could have done a few things with them as this renegade group, and then they tried to capture it again with Punk. That's where it was coming from. Try to get that group and that input. Like Punk sort of takes over, and they try the same thing, and it didn't work then either, because I think that the people he was working with were viewed as they're just no good. It's 12 months later that they get the approach right, because I think they learned from the mistakes of Nexus when they brought the Shield in, and the way they booked the Shield, because the Shield were booked perfectly when they first came in. Yep. And yet, if you look, we're talking 18 months earlier. At the time, and I know we can look back now and we can say, well, Rollins and Ambrose and Moxley and Reigns, they are, they're in a different league. But I think if you looked at it at the time, you would have said Wade Barrett would possibly have been considered in a similar way to Rollins and Ambrose and when they first came in as the Shield. Barrett would have been seen in a similar way. And the talent that he had with, Gabriel and Slater, and there were some talented enough guys there that you could have had them run Rothshot. Barrett would have been looked at as a main event player for years to come, and it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
When the Shield came in, it's almost like they went, these were the mistakes we made with Nexus. We're not going to do that again. This is how we're going to book the Shield, and it worked. And the Shield became, the cornerstone of the company to this day.
Yep. The Shield helped become the face of AEW without even realizing it. Spread out everywhere. So we definitely 2010, which on the whole is just rough anyway. I like your thinking, Dave. I got to give you props. I like your thinking. You found a way to kind of make it work, but I think I like the Punk joining that night kind of thing. And I think it would have elevated him a little earlier than he ended up being elevated in 2011, maybe leading. I mean, I know we did Punk in our first episode, but I didn't even think about it till this moment. But thinking about him and the pipe bomb, maybe he gets motivated even earlier because he joins the Nexus earlier.
Or maybe he gets disgruntled earlier because WWE still stuff it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think we did a pretty good job there. I think that 2010 just, everybody just got so angry at Cena just burying everybody, which is very un-Cena-like. I think that's the thing that's even more mind-boggling at the moment, was that Cena was not known for burying anybody. And, they kind of got buried there. So,
yeah.
Well, I think we did a pretty good job of, we picked some pretty good, some pretty good moments. I think, there were some other ones maybe in the last 10 years that maybe next year we'll find. Do we rebook 2013? Maybe not the matches itself, but maybe results, etc. So, some things to think about for next year's episode, because we'll obviously have to go back to these. We could go back to these down the line. So, well, there you go. I hope everybody enjoyed our trip through the looking glass at past amazing SummerSlams, and then maybe not so amazing SummerSlams, which is kind of what we did. Dave, where can everybody find you?
You guys can find me on Facebook, Dave Hall on Facebook. You'll find me, as I always like to say, lurking the Place to Be Facebook pages and commenting around in various chats. You can reach out to me, private message me. Love to hear from you all. Always happy for a chat anytime, and happy to discuss if you agree, if you disagree. Put your ideas out there. I mean, it's not, we're fans. I'm not on any booking committee in the world, and my ideas are my ideas. And if you have a different idea, I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to chat about it with you. So reach out to me and have a chat.
Yes, because Dave's an amazing chatter, and he's pretty smart. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at Scott C. Podfather. You can please follow the brand on Twitter at PTBN Wrestling. You could, obviously, I'm all over the Facebook pages as well. Let us know what you think. Were we on target with some of our rebookings in the alternate universes, some of these SummerSlams that needed fixing? Maybe there's some that you think need fixing. Reach out to us at PTBN Wrestling on the Twitters. We'll be back in September with something. And then October, everyone, the show is 1 year old. So I'm very excited about that, Dave. We got through a year of excellent episodes. So we will be back in September with maybe we'll rebook The Unforgivens. No. Unforgivens and fall brawls. There we go. Now, well, maybe we could. Who knows? And also, please, at PTBN Wrestling, what topics would you like? I mean, trust me, we're just coming up with some topics, but please, if there's anything you would like Dave and I to dive through the looking glass at that we haven't touched on yet through our first, 10 episodes, or 11 episodes? 10 episodes. Please, feel free. We would love to hear from you with your ideas, because if we like it, which we likely will, because we like a good challenge here on Through the Looking Glass, we will definitely do that. So, everyone have a wonderful rest of your August. Stay cool if you're in my side of the world. Stay kind of warm if you're on his side of the world, although he's not that cold. And we will see you in September through the Looking Glass.